You're in for a treat, and her lesson today is self-awareness, which fits right in with our March theme of listening, learning, leading. May I please introduce Reverend Kathy Fernandes. Thank you. Good morning. Yes, I have been traveling a lot, although I can say that a lot of traveling happened approximately every other week for the end of 2013, and 2014 has not been as crazy. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here with all of you in this way. Thank you. So, I always like to ask lots of questions. I won't let you down. The last lesson I did was in January, and we focused on the topic beyond your mind. And one of the main messages there was that you are not the chatter of your mind. Thank God. I heard that. You are the conscious awareness beyond that chattering. And we're used to mind chattering because, let's face it, if you watch TV, constant chatter, right? And if you've done any spiritual work, you've probably heard that we all tell ourselves stories. So it's constant mind chatter, but you are really the spirit that can observe your mind chatter. And that's the spirit we're going to focus on today in becoming self-aware. So last time, as well as this time, I had originally bought this book on my Kindle, which means it was electronic. And after continuing to harvest more and more out of it, I decided I needed to have it in my hands. And there are more in the bookstore. The topic today is also inspired by the book called Proof of Heaven. How many people have read Proof of Heaven? There's a few hands out there, but not a whole lot. Okay, I'll talk about that in a second. So let me ask you, why do you think the topic of self-awareness would be important to your spiritual journey?
Because it's my journey.
Because it's your journey, yes. And what does self-awareness do for you?
Frees your soul, your spirit.
Could free you up, absolutely. Opens your heart.
Gives me access to my inner spirit.
Gives you access to who you are, the gifts that you are, the presence that you are, the spirit that you are.
Helps you recognize the things you want to change.
Helps you recognize the things you want to change, because you cannot change things that you're not necessarily aware of, right? And Science of Mind, when you take classes for the first time, that's one of the key things is, are you paying attention to what you think about? Are you paying attention to what you believe? And you don't have to change it, but the first step is definitely becoming aware of it. Once you are aware of it, then you have choices whether you want to change it or do something different. And then as a practitioner, you learn spiritual mind treatment and other tools that allow you to make the change should you make that choice. So you might think of self-awareness like this. Have you ever been stuck in a maze? What does it feel like to be walking around in a maze? Lost. Confused, limited. Claustrophobic. Panicked. Hopeless. Stuck. What was that? Thrilled? Yeah, actually, I could see if you were looking at it as an adventure. But you probably get frustrated if you think you're trying to get somewhere and you end up in those dead ends, right?
Yeah, we got stuck in the corn maze of Halloween.
You did. You've had real life experience. And the key thing about that is your life sometimes like that? It's your stories that put you in your maze. those stories or beliefs will continue until you heal them. So, a real life example from the book, Proof of Heaven. Dr. Eben Alexander is a brain surgeon. And he tells an amazing story about his near-death experience. And some of you may know that near-death experience, the shortcut for that is NDE, near-death experience. And before his NDE, being a scientist and a doctor, his understanding was that our human consciousness came somehow out of our physical body. Of course, doctors understand our physiological, biological, chemical processes. And so doctors believe that out of all those processes comes consciousness, right? Where are the practitioners in the room? Physical comes first, right? No, physical is not the cause. Physical is the effect. So he speaks in the book, which, he's not of this flavor, well, maybe he is now, but let me say, based on a few things that he says in the book, and it's not highly religious, he just speaks from a perspective that he's not necessarily from this philosophy. However, after his NDE experience, he becomes aware that the physical comes out of the consciousness and not the other way around. Now he's a metaphysician. Because he understands that consciousness, the invisible, is there, but just because it's invisible doesn't mean that it's not there, doesn't have power, and isn't from where we come from. The essence of life with a capital L, love with a capital L. Science of Mind's been teaching that, since about the 1940s. However, now he's frustrated, Dr. Eben Alexander, because many of his doctor colleagues refuse to listen to him or to see and review the data that he has found on NDE and consciousness. We aren't like that, right? In the book, he essentially shares that based on his own past ignorance, and now the ignorance of his colleagues, they already have constructed beliefs around how consciousness works. And in their own arrogance, they think that they don't have any more to learn in this area. I don't work with medical doctors, but I work with PhDs. And I know there's some in the room, and I know you know what I'm talking about. But really, we all have some arrogance because we all think we know something, which means that we've already constructed our thoughts and our beliefs, our stories around our situations. So, note, in order to be able to learn, it means being open. Your heart is open, your mind is open, you're open to seeing and feeling and experiencing new perspectives, which means we have to release our arrogance as though we already know. We have to be willing to see that we might not be seeing the whole picture. Because what happens the minute your consciousness, or in the case of the corn maze, what happens when you're lifted out of the maze about, 200 feet off the ground? What happens then? Perspective changes. And then what happens? Clarity, because now you can see the maze, right? You can see where the dead ends are, you can see the paths, and a way out. Wow. Now, the way I would say the way out is I would say a healing. The other thing that you have to understand is that you are not less than for not knowing. That means that there needs to be some self-worth, but yet humbleness so that you can be curious, asking questions, listening, and looking for those new perspectives that you haven't seen before. And that means getting out of your mind chatter. That means getting into an awareness, being in the present moment, and being able to be lifted above the details and circumstances of your life. Because we all want to pay attention and work our stories based on what's happening on the ground. But as practitioners know, that's not really where we want to focus. We want to bring it back to cause. What is the cause? And in order to do that, we have to let go of the details and allow ourselves to be in a space that opens ourselves to new possibilities and new perspectives. Chapter 9. The spiritual journey is one of constant transformation. In order to grow, you must give up the struggle to remain the same and learn to embrace change at all times. One of the most important areas requiring change is how we solve our personal problems. I bolded this part. We normally attempt to solve our inner disturbances by protecting ourselves. We normally attempt to solve our inner disturbances by protecting ourselves. Real transformation begins when you embrace your problems as agents for change. So in the book, we're going to understand how the process works. The book talks a little bit about the thorn, or thorns, as the case may be. So let's pretend you have a thorn on your arm. Based on what I said earlier about normally attempting to solve our inner disturbances by protecting ourselves, I'm going to protect this thorn so that it doesn't get rubbed. Then I start walking around in my life and I start meeting people like this. Oh, here comes one. And pretty soon, we don't even realize that we have a thorn, but everything is about protecting, because I don't want anybody to touch this thorn. You find new ways to sleep. You find new ways to feed yourself. And pretty soon, you've built your whole life around that thorn. Now, the only problem with that is, now you have another thorn. And pretty soon, your life circumstances and your relationships evolve around how you handle your thorn. And this is indeed like living in a maze. So you can't heal until you do something different with the thorn. But if you have no self-awareness that that thorn is there and how you're protecting yourself, then you won't see how you have other choices. With self-awareness, you can see the thorn and remove it and live more freely, as John was saying earlier. You have more freedom, and you can live without constantly spending your time and your energy protecting that thorn. So now are you interested in how you can become self-aware? Yes. I thought you might be. So I have a couple different tools I'm going to introduce. I can't say enough about the book. Of course, I can't reiterate everything about it here, but the shortcut version is get out of your mind chatter. And that takes practice and, dare I say the word, discipline.
You never named that book.
The Untethered Soul. Thank you. Sorry, I appreciate you. Kathy Zavada was the one who highlighted it back in January when she was here. So this is why it's important to practice meditation. And I know that meditation for some is difficult just to sit in a chair. Well, I can tell you that yesterday I went for a beautiful run in the park. And after I was maybe 30 minutes into my run, I was in one of the groves that are just the groves of the oak trees that are really tall. There's not much on the ground, but the canopy is really large. And my goal there was to turn off my mind chatter and just listen and look at what I saw as though it was the first time. Absolutely outstanding when you're not trying to label, oh, those are the birds chattering, and oh, those are the trees, and look at the, yeah. You know, our mind is constantly taking in lots of senses, always. You're listening to me talk, or maybe pretending to listen to me talk. What's your little toe saying? Your little toe's been there in your shoe all along, but are you listening to your little toe? And now you are. Exactly. And so the thing is that if we can remove ourselves from our mind chatter and our story, we can actually gain more self-awareness about where we are at, where our heart is at, where the fear is at, where the thorn is at, where the pain is at, and begin to make different choices. So, what meditation does, regardless of how you choose to do that, is allow you to become more comfortable being an observer. And we tend to practice lots of mind chatter. Again, I talked about the TV and such. And hence, Our society doesn't emphasize or allow us enough of our own space. Again, it takes discipline to create our own space, to be in the present moment, to practice listening. To practice listening without mind chatter, judgment, interpretation, story, to extract the personal. Because the thorn makes it difficult if we're paying attention to that. So for me personally, what has this process done? I'll give you one example. I like to fix things. I tend to be, proactive, tend to be a leader, which means I tend to want to jump in and fix things. None of you are familiar with that, right? Nah. What I need to do sometimes is just lean back and love what is. Now, some of you have probably heard of Byron Katie. I always want to call her Katie Byron. Her name is Byron Katie. There's a book that's called Loving What Is. Her process is called The Works. You can look this up on the internet. It's a process that she actually has you step through on the internet, or, being the techie that I am, I have an iPad app that's called Loving What Is, built by Byron Katie or her folks, and it actually steps you through the process when you're trying to figure out how to pluck that thorn. There's another tool I want to introduce you to, and it's called Johari's Window, Johari. And Johari comes from Joseph and Harry created this model in 1955, so they called it Johari. I know you've been waiting.
Can't see it on the sides.
Okay, I need to step it back a little bit so you can see pieces.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, and I'll explain what's on here so you... So, on this sheet is a quadrant, right? I have 4 areas. Let me describe the 4 areas and then the process. So the first area is called Quadrant 1. It's the open space. This is what you know about yourself. This is your unknown self, what you don't know about yourself. This across this way is what others know about you. And this space down here is what's unknown to others. So The open space is the most healthy space, the space that you want to continue to expand, so that you know about yourself and others know about yourself. But we all have areas that are blind. I think I talked a little bit maybe about blind spots. So the unknown self is you may not know things about yourself that others know about you. Do you know you've been protecting that thorn? What thorn? We all have it. It's there. It's an area we all get to learn from. And at the same time, there's an area that there's things you know about yourself that others don't know about you. And this is maybe what you keep close. And of course, there would be different levels of the hidden area, meaning with your partner, you may share more things than you would with an acquaintance, right? And of course, there are levels of that. All right? And then there's this area down here in quadrant 4 where it's like what people don't know about you and what you don't know about yourself, which, may happen sometimes when you're in a brand new circumstance and all of a sudden you may discover new things about yourself or other people may discover new things about you or both. And the concept here, again, in self-awareness is to continue to expand quadrant 1, to begin to ask questions from others about what you don't know about yourself so that you can learn about the thorns that maybe you're not aware that you're protecting, and at the same time also revealing more of yourself. And when you do this, then the relationships and situations in your life begin to open up because you become more self-aware and you become more aware of choices or things that you can see or do differently. Now, as I'm standing right here, do I have blind spots? Yeah, where are my blind spots? Behind me. Do I have eyes behind me? No. So how can I see that perspective? That's right. I love it. Thank you. All right. This is Kathy's, I wanted to be a scientist at one point. This is Kathy's homemade props. A vice grips. And what does it look like? It's on the end of that vice grip. A quarter. And I'm just sticking it in the cup because then it'll hold it for me. So here we are. There are many perspectives on life. Am I seeing the ones behind me? What happens if I take this mirror and I put it right here? Now what? What do I see? I see one side. In this case, it's the face of the quarter. So if I'm willing, it's true, if I'm willing, can I now see things that I couldn't see about myself before? Matter of fact, this side of the quarter doesn't know it says 1973, but if it looks in the mirror, it might actually learn that.
So the mirror's in the front?
Uh-huh. All right, now, does this side of the quarter see any of that? But what happens when I do this? Now what? Can they see each other? Can they see themselves? You've just opened up new perspectives. You've just now moved into the open area and become more self-aware, more aware of your options, more aware of who you are. So what do you do with this self-awareness? Again, in turning away from the mind chatter and learning more about this, you have more, well, let's just say that you're greater connected to your source because you know more about yourself. The walls are of your own making, and you're blocking the light. You're creating the maze by letting your mind chatter stay in the maze. But if you use tools to see a greater picture, again, 200 feet off the ground, then you can see the maze. And now you have more options. But to go beyond, you must go past your limits. You must be willing to consider that everything you think you know right now, even your favorites, could change. And if you accept that change, you might find new things. So I go back to Eben. I would love to talk to him in person to talk about how he's trying to talk to his colleagues about beyond the physical, beyond the mind. But he literally says they've already constructed their beliefs, and even though they can't describe to me physiologically how consciousness comes out of the physicalness, they will not look at his information or his data. And what's intriguing is he has read his own medical records, and he had meningitis, and he was in a coma for 7 days, and they were ready to take him off life support. And he came back. And he came back knowing his experience from the other side. So he feels he knows differently than his colleagues feel they know. And the last piece that I'll add to this is spirituality is the commitment to go beyond. The commitment of perhaps, some people don't like the word discipline, but practicing being in the present, practicing being without the mind chatter, practicing seeing people, seeing circumstances, seeing relationships, seeing without the mind chatter that goes into the judgment and goes into the stories, etc. An opportunity to observe. So, now, thanks to Sharon Sauls, I have a little gift. Let me ask you, so what do you need to do to become more self-aware?
Stop the check.
Train yet?
I already have one.
Okay.
I don't need one. Ask another question.
No, I'm going to ask the same question because there's more than one answer.
Suspend your disbelief.
Suspend your disbelief. Okay, say that in a positive aspect. Suspend your disbelief.
Be open to
Yep.
what you can acknowledge.
Be more open to what may be there. You may not be seeing the whole picture, and you may have blind spots. Can you be somewhere at 2 o'clock today?
Yes.
There you go. Or the gift is given to you. You may give the gift to somebody else if you prefer. Okay, so did it help to have some tools to think about to become more self-aware? Yes. And so how would you like treatment to solidify that? Yes. Okay, let's do it. Get yourself comfortable and indeed centered. Quickly just scan your body to where you may be able to relax even more. Together we step into the conscious awareness, the intelligence of spirit, the love that exists as the foundation of all things, the life that exudes by the spirits in the room, by those connected to this community, by the rain that falls. It is all good. And as we allow the opportunity to just be, we allow spirit. We allow spirit to create a new opportunity to see things differently. So I'm knowing for each individual who is hearing this message today That by knowing their self-worth of just being, without the interpretation, without the story, that indeed there are beautiful things to be seen, to be heard, to be felt. And we allow ourselves to just sit in that wonder. To allow life to express itself without us trying to fix, control, manage, but rather allow the essence, the energy, the spirit, the vibration, the intelligence of God indeed express itself in the world. We open our hearts and our minds, allowing this greater expression to be revealed in each individual here. We allow the gifts, the presence that their spirit brings, continue to bless one another. And we give great appreciation for all that has come before, for the life that expresses itself as each of us. And I am blessing all the gifts to be received and all the gifts to be given. And I release it, allowing it just to be so. And we say together in affirmation, and so it is. Would the ushers please come forward?